Hey guys, welcome back to Better Body Radio. So this is actually our first guest episode of 2021, and no better way to really get started than being joined by the one and only Meghan Callaway. So Meghan is a veteran strength conditioning coach and an absolute bodyweight ninja. You only really have to go and have a look at her Instagram and you will just see some of the amazing things that she can do with her body. But she's not just an incredible athlete. She's a fantastic coach. She's been coaching clients in person for well over 17 years and has been an online coach for over 4 years. She's a prolific fitness blogger and content creator. Meghan is really helping thousands, literally thousands of people from all over the world, over 100 countries worldwide with her notorious training plans, the Ultimate Pull-Up program and the Ultimate Push-Up program, among many others like the Landmine program and soon to be released Lower Body program. So in today's episode, we really dig into Meghan's origins in the industry, the car accident that proved to be a blessing in disguise, how her approach as a coach has evolved over the years, and of course, what she thinks led to such incredible success of the pull-up and push-up programs. This is the first guest episode of 2021, so grab a coffee and enjoy. Hey Meghan, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, absolute pleasure. It was a no-brainer. Once I had your name come up from 3 different guests, I think it was just, it was like fate. It just had to happen. So I'm glad that you also chased me up because I know we had this conversation initially just around kind of December time. And, you know, I put a pause on the podcast for about a month and you actually were the one that followed up with me after a while. So I really do appreciate that.
You're welcome. I mean, I usually don't follow up, but I thought it would be an awesome show to be on.
Okay, cool. Why is that?
I mean, Gareth spoke highly of you. I kind of checked out some of the episodes. I was even just kind of stalking you on Spotify.
Okay.
So I thought, oh, okay, I would like to be a guest. And I also, back in not in the earlier days, but even in kind of like post pull-up program release, I did a lot of podcasts. And I mean, I love doing them, but it's also time consuming. So I kind of gave myself a bit of a break. And I don't think I have been on a show maybe since July. So it's been a little while. Like I kind of just wanted to give myself a break, but I thought this would be a great one to be back on.
Awesome. Excellent. And what was the last one you were on? Was that Andrew's podcast by any chance?
No, I believe it was. Do you know Adam Willis?
No, I don't.
He's awesome. I mean, I've been on his show, I want to say 6 times.
Jeez.
He's from the UK. And I mean, we've talked about fitness, we've talked about mental health, we've talked about my programs. We kind of have been all over the place. So I did 2 with him, actually 2 consecutive weeks.
That's awesome. I'm going to have to go and check out some of those.
Yeah, the Empowered Body podcast.
It's a good name. I like that.
It is. Yeah, I'm all about empowerment.
Definitely. And I think, I'll touch on this a little bit later with the article, and we'll kind of touch on that because I know that you're really big on having people kind of chase goals, but doing it for the right reasons rather than the wrong reasons. So we'll dive down that rabbit hole a little bit later on.
Okay. All
right. So let's dive into question number 1. So for those that are listening and maybe haven't come across your work, and I think if you're in the fitness space, we talked about this off air, people are a bit kind of almost, there's definitely sects or kind of camps, so to speak. Some people kind of stay in their lane, but for anyone who's just a curious fitness enthusiast, most people at some stage would have came across you anyway. I mean, you've got a pretty decent following. I can remember from Instagram, it's over 50,000, I think, right?
I have to look. I believe 62.
Yes, I mean you're
62 and change.
And change, which you can't forget.
Exactly.
So I mean, your content's getting in front of a lot of people, and a lot of people are benefiting from that content. Which, as we get into the pull-up and the push-up programs, we'll be able to touch on exactly that. And for those that listen to the intro, of course, as well, and then skip past it, I'll have touched on just how many people and how many countries have actually been touched by those programs. But I think it might be cool for the listeners to know a little bit about your backstory, a little bit about your origins in the industry. In other words, who is Meghan Callaway?
I joke every time I'm asked this question on a podcast. It's always my least favorite thing to talk about. And I mean, I have been around for quite a while, over 17 years. So I decided to be a coach. I mean, I was originally in university. I took kinesiology. I was going to become a PE teacher. But after my first year, I decided I wanted to be a personal trainer. I'd been working out, I mean, not well, but I'd been working out since I was about 16. I grew up playing multiple sports. I played competitive soccer for 27 years. But when I was a kid, I also played ice hockey and baseball on boys' teams. I was quite good. Kind of a cool story with the baseball. When I was in, I believe I was 12, I was in majors. I don't know if you guys have, if you're familiar with the leagues, but it was a all-star league. I made the Little League all-star team that was competing for the Little League World Series, which is a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
I was the only girl. We did not make it, but I was a starting first baseman, and I believe I batted second in the lineup. Anyway, so long story short, I grew up an athlete. I still really identify as an athlete. And that was partly why I wanted to become a coach. So when I first started out, I mean, even thinking back to how I coached and just at my mindset, everything, I'm horrified. And I think most coaches can probably admit that if they were still doing now what they did back when they started, it would probably not be a very good thing.
100%.
No, just like thinking back, I just cringe. But back when I started, there was not really there wasn't social media, very few good resources. And I mean, honestly, like I probably obtained a lot of my knowledge, and you can't see my face right now, but I'm cringing.
Right.
The Biggest Loser, people like Jillian Michaels, like I'm cringing very hard.
I'm cringing to be honest, but
no, it was horrifying. And I mean, I learned kind of on the fly as well. I was hired purely because of my kinesiology background, and I was hired and I was coaching people the next day. Wow. And I mean, I am grateful for my sports background because I feel it gave me something. But at the same time, I know a lot of people who are coaches who are athletes are terrible. So, I mean, just because you played sports does not make you a good coach. Anyway, so over the years, I worked with a lot of people. I mean, most of my clients were general population. And I feel like this is probably important to bring up because it also had a carryover to my coaching. In my earlier days with my training, and I mean, it stemmed from a lot of different reasons, I trained purely to control my appearance. And I mean, what I did was not effective. It was not empowering. I've used these words before. It was totally soul zapping. But because of my own training, I think I also tended to attract a lot of clients who only cared about training for aesthetics. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with training for just aesthetics. Yeah. But I find that when so many people do that, they are missing the big picture. And so I know you have had this written down in the questions as well. So when I was 28, I was in a car accident. I was driving. One of my like a close friend, she blew her knee out playing basketball. She tore her ACL. And there was a snowstorm here. It was 11 at night. I was driving to the hospital to go get her. And my car hit black ice. And the car was totaled. I walked away uninjured, or so I thought. But maybe about a month later, I just started getting the weirdest full body symptoms. I did not know what was happening. I jumped from doctor to doctor for 5 years until I could find somebody who actually caught the root, like who figured out what was happening. And so, I mean, in that time, I was still training, but I don't want to use the words pain because I know obviously there's different reasons for pain. There's different degrees of pain. I want to say it was extreme discomfort where I was basically not able to function. I did not know how I was going to go on living the way I was feeling. I had to finally, I mean, I'd been playing soccer throughout this whole ordeal. I finally had to quit just because the overall discomfort and stress had become too much. My training, I mean, my coaching even, I felt like a total imposter just because I was not able to do a lot, even like demoing exercises and stuff. I would often not be able to do exercises, or I'd have clients do different exercises just because I did not want to have to demo something. So it was affecting my coaching. I felt like a total imposter. And I finally found somebody, this brilliant physio, and it was coming from my ribs and just severe nerve irritation that had been stemming from the ribs. And so within 2 sessions with this physio, it was almost like the symptoms and all these things that I had been told, how tight I was, how weak I was. and just stupid things like, that isn't like, that's not true. Like, oh, your hips are out. Oh, your back is out. The hips and the back do not go out. But back in the day, I mean, you trust people. And I also knew a lot less then than I know now. So even just from that experience with my own coaching, it made me recognize the importance of words, how powerful words are, how they can absolutely destroy somebody, how they can build people up. I mean, I could go on about this forever, really, but it completely changed my mindset with my own training. It completely changed my mindset with my own coaching. My focus shifted away from controlling the way I looked to basically wanting to feel better, wanting to be able to do cool things, just wanting to be able to feel like a badass, basically, and like an athlete again, because I'd lost that. So it was, again, a horrible ordeal. But I think that it was almost like, now that it's been years since it happened, it was almost a big blessing and has kind of made me the coach and even the athlete I am now.
Right.
So that was like a big tangent.
Very, very curious as to what the physio did in those 2 sessions to kind of help you. Was it breathing related? What was it that was going on?
Well, I think, and I mean, again, like, some people believe stuff like this to be true. Other people think, oh, it's placebo. I based on my own experiences, what he did was amazing. And yes, we did work on breathing, but what he suspects happened when I was in the car accident, my car, so it hit black ice. I was on the highway. Luckily, I was going under the speed limit, but I mean, I was still going 60,
Right.
60 and an 80. So my front end smashed the median, and then it spun across the highway. Luckily, nobody else was on the road. And I had time to think when this was all happening. Everything slowed down. And I remember in my head, I said to myself, I'm going to die. And then I said, no, I'm just going to be hurt really badly. And so, right as my driver's side was about to hit the median, I leaned across the car. My torso was completely rotated. I grabbed across the other end of the car just so I did not hit the driver's side when the impact occurred. And so what he thinks happened, I mean, there was obviously like a lot of issues coming from my ribs, but the nerves were being severely, severely compressed and irritated. And they had been like that for 5 years. So my body basically just got used to it. It just adapted to being completely screwed up. So he did I can't remember everything he did, but it was basically to address the nerve irritation that was stemming from, they've been compressed, I guess. And I mean, I'm just using what he told me. I don't know if it is actually factual, but it was mainly addressing the nerve irritation. And then I had to relearn how to move. I had to relearn how to do everything just because I had completely been compensating for 5 years.
Yeah,
and I mean, I had just been told,
kind of came up with its own strategy for just kind of, right, we don't want any more damage occurring here, so let's just keep you like this now. So I think you had to almost retrain your nervous system. Like, first of all, everything's okay. I can actually move and function as I used to. That's so interesting. And it's just sometimes, like you say, those practitioners who just have that experience that they can just do things that, aren't necessarily easily explainable, but it works. And that's ultimately the main thing.
And I mean, even with him, and he moved away, but I used to refer a lot of clients to him. And I remember one client, at first she didn't like him because she said, oh, well, he didn't really do a lot, like in terms of like the manual treatment that physios often do when they have no clue what they're doing and they just symptom chase, basically. And so he is very, like, he just thinks, and like he would really be figuring things out versus just mindlessly treating symptoms and working hard, so to speak. And so, I mean, I experienced more progress with him in 2 sessions than I did in 5 years. And then I kept seeing him. And I mean, again, like, he was teaching me how to like relearn how to walk, how to even just like body weight exercises, the breathing, everything. And so it even made me more mindful as a coach. And it also made me a lot better at, for example, referring out. Like, if it's within my scope of practice, of course, it's something I will work with. But in my earlier days, and I think a lot of coaches are really guilty of doing this, they're scared to admit that they do not know. or something is outside of their scope of practice. So I will always refer out. And I mean, I think as a coach, like you have to do that, but so many people do not.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. I actually spent, it was about a 7-month period where I actually spent time in a clinic dealing with some of the post-operative patients. And that was a huge eye opener for me. It kind of see working in that environment, and I was very lucky to kind of be beside an incredibly talented sports chiropractor. She's actually Canadian, interestingly enough. She just moved back, and she was fantastic. And she had a very, like you said, also a very problem-solving type approach. Luckily, she had also done many different endeavors. She'd done physique sports. I think she'd worked with a lot of the ice hockey teams out there and a lot of the other kind of semi-professional, professional teams back before she moved out to Dubai. And it was the same thing. Like, it's just their ability to kind of look at things through a much wider lens.
Yes.
Crazy. And it also made me realize as well, as a trainer, that was one of the first times that I had to check myself and say, right, well, I'm not so going to be so overconfident about thinking I can solve X. And it's okay, like you said, to actually refer out. And as a result, you end up just getting way more respect from your clients because you create almost this network of all these different people who can help you versus, right, I'm not your one-stop shop. I'm very good at helping you achieve this and solving these problems. But if you've got this going on, then there's these whole other group of people that are very good at solving those problems. And you're 100% right. I think that's the same worldwide, that just too many people want to try and solve things that they just have no business as well outside their scope of practice. So I think that's great.
Yeah.
Comes with a bit with experience, I think, as well. You kind of become, even though you gain more knowledge, you become less overconfident and you're actually more likely to refer out more often the more experience you get. I don't know if that's been the case for you as well.
I mean, I almost think it's a sign of confidence if you are able to admit that you don't know something and then to refer out. I find a lot of the people who are maybe they doubt their abilities, they're almost sometimes the people who tend to do things that are outside their scope of practice.
Yeah, possibly so. Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a good confidence and a good sense. I mean, try to word this well, even just knowing you don't necessarily know how to do something. I don't think that's a lack of confidence. I think it's a sign that you trust yourself and you know what you excel at and what is within your scope of practice.
Yeah. 100%.
And a lot of newer coaches don't necessarily have this ability yet. And I mean, sometimes it does take time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the way I always tend to phrase it, especially within our team and to some of the other coaches I work with, is the only thing that changes the further you get into your coaching career is you become a lot more certain about what you don't know, and your mind opens up to exploration. You're more willing to dive down those rabbit holes and actually understand that, okay, when you think you've started to scratch the surface on a topic, there's chances are that there's actually another level to go down. And so I always try and remind myself of that, and that keeps me a bit grounded and trying to find people who are potentially a couple of steps beyond where you are and trying to be around those people, because that very quickly will tell you how much more work we've all constantly got to do to hone our craft as coaches.
It's never ending.
Yeah.
I mean, every day I am learning more and more how much I do not know. And I mean, how much I want to keep learning. And so it's exciting too.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So I think this actually segues really, really nicely. And I think we've almost like scratched off the first two questions just in that segment there. So this will really, really move well into essentially your coaching approach, how that's potentially evolved over the last 17 years from when you started out. I know it's like, yes, we look back and we possibly cringe at those early days. But if we were to look over all the formative years of your career right up to date, what would you say has been the kind of biggest evolutions in your coaching approach?
Maybe in my earlier days, I tried, you know, how people complain a lot about being bored and wanting to switch things up all the time. I tell people, and I mean, my training, what you see me posting online, yeah, some of the stuff looks kind of innovative, but everything I do, and even the people that I work with, they will tell you pretty much everything we do is so basic. And then I will sprinkle in, if it makes sense to do so, I will sprinkle in some of the more innovative exercises. But even the innovative exercises that I'm sharing, they are basically very fundamental with just a slight, like an additional layer to them. Yeah. And everything, I mean, you can be, I think a skill that a lot of people don't have, and like people try to be very creative, but I think it's hard to find people who are very creative, but in a way where it actually makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, it's a huge pet peeve of mine when you see people just trying to be creative, but when there's no rhyme or reason for what they're doing. It's like, if you were to ask me why why did I share this exercise? What is the rationale behind it? I will always be able to tell you. So, I mean, I kind of got sidetracked, but in my earlier days, I might have tried to be, maybe to keep people interested, so to speak, but not in a way that was necessarily as helpful as it could have been. I was also, I mean, again, way too focused on the aesthetics, but in a way that was not helpful and empowering, I don't think.
Mm.
And so I do think it took the car accident. I mean, maybe it would have happened naturally, but I mean, to help people just feel better, move better, to feel physically capable, to feel empowered. And over the years, even just in the past 5 years, I don't attract clients anymore who purely want to change their appearance. I mean, I don't feel like I'm the best person for that job. So, I mean, maybe people recognize that. I
Mm.
attract clients, and I mean, general population, athletes, and I kind of, even in the past year, people who want to learn kind of the more advanced calisthenics exercises that they've seen me doing. So mostly my clients are people who want to do cool exercises, maybe master exercises like pull-ups, push-ups. I had a client actually 2 weeks ago who wanted to learn how to do muscle ups.
Mm.
And I feel like I'm good enough now to actually coach somebody for muscle ups. But before, and I mean, I have had people bugging me ever since they saw me doing them almost 2 years ago to write a program. And I said, I mean, honestly, I would never write a program until I feel like I'm actually qualified.
Mm.
And I still feel like I need to get a lot better at them if I'm going to release a program.
Got you.
And then we talked about this off air as well, but probably over the past couple of years, I don't know the exact percentage, but a large number of my clients are also coaches.
Mm.
And these are people, again, who want to do cool stuff, who want to feel better. And a lot of them also come to me because they want to see how I do things so they can kind of apply it to their own coaching. And my clients, I don't think I mentioned this off air. I see myself as a coach. I don't see myself as a female coach. I don't just cater to women. I cater to everybody. And I think it's kind of evident based on the products I release, the content I put out. And I mean, again, I don't know the exact numbers, but a large number of my clients are men. A large number of my customers are men. I mean, on Instagram, because it shows stats, it's almost 50-50 for men and women who are following me. So I kind of think people just see me as a coach. And I think that's partly why I'm doing as well as I'm doing in certain ways.
Mm. I think always the case when your messaging is very authentic and it's very clear, which, you know, from the time that I've spent following you, I think it is. Often it's not, it never ends up really being much of a surprise who ends up, you know, being your customer, being a client, because like you said, you're promoting a certain style of training, a certain message, and it's all of those little elements that go into why people would buy into you as a coach. And like you said, if you're not trying to fake it to make it kind of thing, then that will tend to happen organically. And I think that's obviously where you've kind of found yourself now, is you've not had to force a particular niche. And like you said, there are going to be people out there that I think you mentioned about, if someone comes to you with a body composition goal, there's probably going to be one or two, you know, quite a few coaches that are going to think, well, actually, you might be a better fit for them. And that, I suppose the fact that those people aren't coming to you for coaching just really highlights the fact that you've really done a great job at kind of communicating who you're serving. And so those people are coming to coaching.
I mean, I have had even several current clients, they kind of had more nutrition related demand, or not demands, but just stuff they wanted to work on. So even one of my current clients, I sent her to a good friend of mine who is amazing in body composition. And so we're the two of us are now working with my client. But that is not something that I would do myself, just because I know there are other people out there who are much better at it.
Yeah. I think that also comes with the confidence and maturity thing as well, is that you're not trying to be a jack of all trades. It's very much a case of, this is what I'm really damn good at. This is what I help you achieve. And so then if someone comes along and is like, I want to step on stage, I want to do a photo shoot, you're just like, yeah, that's a no-brainer. pass it on to your friend who's probably really passionate about working with those type of clients as well, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
Coach, you got to be really passionate about not only, like you say, walking the walk. And I think you said that about the muscle ups there, that you sometimes still feel that you don't feel qualified to teach that. Chances are you're probably more than qualified to teach those things. But I think that probably just speaks volumes to the fact that you want to feel like you've really experienced what it's like to go through that journey of really becoming a master at that movement before you then pass it on to your students. And I think that's a big thing with a lot of good experienced coaches. They really want to make sure that it's all fine and well knowing the research, knowing the theory, but have you lived it? Have you experienced it? I think that's so
Yeah.
good as well.
Well, I did, like the one client, we actually did spend an hour purely working on muscle ups. And do you know who Dean Somerset is?
Oh yeah. No,
yes. So I think she's a client of Dean's. And so because Dean does not specialize in muscle ups, and he thought I would be a good person for this particular client, just for the muscle ups. And so, I mean, I've been doing them now for almost 2 years. They've gotten a lot better, even over the past couple of months, where I feel confident teaching somebody, but I still don't feel like I'm at that level where I would put out a program.
Is that a goal?
Like, I think,
is that a next goal to get to that point?
I mean, it's funny, since people obviously know about my pull-up program, and because people have been watching me doing muscle ups, I have probably received at least 20 or 30 requests from people asking me when I was going to design a program. And so my answer to all the people, it was the same: until I'm good enough at them myself, I will not be releasing a program, because I don't want to be a fraud. Like, I want to feel like it's actually warranted if I put out a program.
Yeah, I think that's
so maybe
your integrity and your ethics as a coach. So I think that only speaks volumes. And the good thing is, at least you know there's a demand for it. So when it's time, you can get out.
Yeah. And I mean, muscle ups are obviously way more technical than pull-ups, but people, and I mean, even a client of mine, like a video client of mine, she asked me if we could work on muscle ups. And so I said to her, I'm like, okay, well, one of the biggest secrets and one of the most overlooked aspects of muscle ups is a good pull up. Yeah. I mean, you could have all the muscle up specific skills in the world, like your wrist transition, even your pull timing, and like a good press over the bar. But if your pull is weak, no chance.
Yeah.
A strict muscle up. I mean, kipping muscle ups, it's a totally different skill. I mean, it's like comparing apples and oranges. It's not the same thing.
100%.
And I mean, you probably, like, because like you've done CrossFit, so like, like obviously the kipping versus the non-kipping. So, I mean, if people are looking to do strict muscle ups, your pull up has to be exceptional, has to be high, it has to be powerful. So this particular client, her pull up, because we hadn't been working on pull ups, I had her show me her pull up, and she wasn't even able to do one. And so I just said, okay, well, let's kind of take a step back. Let's really get good at pull-ups before we work towards the muscle up.
Yeah, 100%.
And so it's,
like you said,
yeah, so
such a good ability you need to create enough inertial force and velocity to actually even get to the position where you've even got an opportunity to get that internal rotation at the shoulder. So yeah, makes sense.
And I mean, even on reps, and I mean, something that I think is super important, I'm kind of getting sidetracked, but as a coach, videoing yourself, like videoing your own training, is so integral for learning. I mean, you can catch what you're doing well, what you're not doing well. And if you can't catch these things in your own videos, how do you expect to be able to do this with clients in person or online? So I think a huge learning tool, studying your own videos. And so for me, when I'm studying my muscle ups, now I'm at the point, I actually did 4 in a row a couple of days ago, which I have a PR of wanting 5 perfectly strict reps. I set a goal for 6 months, but I'm under 1 month in, and I am able to do 4. And so, I mean, I'm thinking within maybe even 2-3 months, I'll be able to do 5 perfectly strict, and I do them from an L-sit. Just because I'm training, I don't know if you've seen the bars that I'm using at my house.
Yeah.
I love them, but you cannot be vertical. So I'm forced to do them from an L-sit and completely strict. But the reason I bring this up, on the reps, where I don't necessarily do as well and where my transition is really ugly, it is because my pull, when I fatigue, obviously when you fatigue, your pull might not be as high. You try to transition earlier. So then you see the elbows flipping up or flipping, like flaring out. You see the shoulders shrugging. And so if the pull is high, it almost pretty much fixes those breakdowns that are going to happen.
Yeah, it's a bit of an overachiever. Like you set 6 months and I'll just achieve it in 2 months and then move on to the next number. Maybe be doing 10 by the time 6 months comes by. Let's see.
I actually was thinking about that yesterday. And I mean, again, if I do 5, they have to be perfect. I'm not just going to do 5 reps and count them as 5 if they're not good. So I will hopefully 5 perfect reps and then we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. There's an interesting aspect to that there as well that you're also not getting as well, is that we know that secondary joint positions play a massive influence on the ability to contract a tissue, right? And so the fact that you're not able to keep those hips somewhat in extension, which provides so much rigidity to the actual movement as well, you've kind of taken it out of the equation. You're putting the hip flexors in such a, essentially a really shortened position. That's such a tough position to pull yourself out of. So I'd be really excited and interested to see when you do get into a gym again, you're able to get on a bar, you're able to get vertical. That'll be super cool to see what you're able to do.
Well, I have a bar. I don't know if you've seen some of the outdoor videos I shared. I in my backyard, I have this really cool outdoor gym where it actually does have bars where I can do muscle ups and I can be perfectly vertical. But just with the weather, when I like to train fairly early. So it would either be dark, it would be raining, there'd be frost. So I haven't trained in my backyard gym since probably September.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have these bars. I'm lucky. I have a company that sponsors me and they send me this amazing equipment. So, if anything, I think it'll be easier once I'm out on the bars outside.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, the carryover is going to be insane. Like, you're going to get out there and just go, this is fantastic. These
Yeah.
being in this L set are not much of an issue anymore.
No. And I really enjoy doing them from the L set. I don't know why. And I mean, it could be that about a year ago, I really prioritized strengthening my hip flexors, even just for some of the more calisthenics based exercises I'm doing. And what a difference.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that because it's became a massive trend in the body composition space now. And a lot of the guys, like for example, my coach and his business, the Muscle Mentors, I don't know if you've heard of those guys or not in the UK, but have you heard of the RTS style of programming? Are you aware of like Tom Purvis and the resistance training specialist certification and stuff like that?
It's very familiar, but I can't picture him.
It's I mean, because he's very like, he's not really on social media much or anything like that. He's very low key, but he's based out of Oklahoma, I think. But I mean, he's an absolute genius as far as the exercise mechanics side of things goes. And it's funny, like since a lot more of the physique world has been getting into learning more about exercise mechanics and biomechanics and joints and all that sort of stuff, and active and passive insufficiency and all these different complex terms, they're starting to understand, oh man, like we really neglect things like strengthening our hip flexors. They neglect all these little accessory musculature that, tend to be covered quite well in strength conditioning. Time was really, really neglected in body composition. So you're seeing a lot more now of these kind of hip flexor strengthening movements, with the cable, with body weight and L-sit positions. So I find it so funny that stuff that has been done for such a long period of time in the S&C world that, coaches like yourself have seen massive success. Almost composition guy had to come to you now and say, I'll tell you this amazing thing. I've strengthened my hip flexors and it's done wonders. And you're just like, well, no shit, because we've been doing this for ages. We've seen how profound this is for people to really get strong in that area. So I think it's super interesting that your hip flexors must be made of steel by now, doing all those L-sits.
Yeah. And the thing that makes me laugh too, it's like people they automatically assume that the hip flexors have to be stretched, not strengthened. And if they're tight, and again, I'm going to use tight in quotations because of course there's many different reasons why they might feel this way. Even when I share exercises on my page for the hip flexors, people, it's difficult. If you have not been strengthening your hip flexors, you're going to struggle. And then people will often say, oh, well, they're tight. Shouldn't I just stretch them? And they think for whatever reason, this one muscle group, they think it's just a bad thing to strengthen them and they must be stretched. So it's this mindset that, people, I guess it's like a myth that needs to be undone, that the hip flexors must be stretched. Like that's the reason why they're tight all the time. So it's been interesting, just some of the responses I've received on my page just from the hip flexor exercises. And another muscle group that I actually really started prioritizing were the adductors.
Yeah.
Because everybody, they're obsessed with the glutes, but so many people neglect training their adductors.
Yeah. Funny enough, you say that because in the composition world, that's made a big comeback as well. Training the adductors more directly again.
Mm-hmm. What are some of your favorite adductor exercises?
I mean, I'm probably not as creative as you probably are with the body weight work. Honestly, it's mostly cable and machine based at this point in time, and that purely because it lends very specifically to controlling certain outcomes with the body composition side of things.
Mm-hmm.
But I have really enjoyed doing Copenhagen side planks and variants of that as well. I definitely really enjoy those. They just have a little bit of a different utility. Obviously, we're looking at creating a hypertrophy response. I want to be able to take the adductors to the lengthen and shorten contractile ranges with loads. So that's as far as it goes for me at the moment. But I've done a lot more of that type of work in the past, adductor work. I do love a what's the word, a Cossack squat.
Yes.
Nowadays, as far as just general health of the hips and mobility, they're part of my lower body warm-ups. I don't think I'll ever get rid of, because I've just felt it's almost like you have these certain movements that you do, and when you don't do them for a while, you start to realize how important they are for your joint health and integrity. And so whenever I've taken them out for a period of time, or just I'm rushing through warm-ups and not doing it thoroughly enough, you bring them back in and you notice such a major difference straight away. So yeah, I would say probably outside of the actual machine and cable based work, probably Copenhagen side planks from an isometric standpoint, and then probably Cossack squats.
Have you ever tried, I mean, I'm sure there's multiple names for the exercise, but squat sways, like basically where you get into the bottom position of a squat, your stance is going to be a lot wider than your traditional squat. And you can use a landmine setup, or what I'm doing at my house is I have a 50-pound dumbbell. And then you hold the dumbbells, like your arms are down, dumbbells between your, like underneath your, like middle of your body. And so rather than like a lateral lunge, where you're in the top position of like the top position and you actually have to lunge down, you just are pushing from side to side, staying in the bottom position of the squat, using the adductors and the glutes, and you feel the quads as well. It is phenomenal. That's what I'll do. I either do it as part of my warm up, or sometimes I'll do it towards the end of the workout. But it's made a huge difference with my squatting. It's made a huge difference with my single leg, for example, skater squats, pistol squats. When I go out to sprint, if I hadn't sprinted in a while, I would experience a lot of soreness, like not necessarily even good muscle soreness in my adductors. Since I started training my adductors very consistently, when I go out to run, I will have no soreness in the adductors. And it used to be really bad. It would be basically, it'd feel like I hadn't played soccer in a year, and then I would have just stepped out onto the field and played a 90-minute game.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm 40, so I mean, I still feel very young, but technically, I guess in training years, I'm not the youngest. But I mean, I feel like I'm in my teens or 20s.
That's cool, because you're obviously keeping, joint integrity very high, because you're exploring those kind of ranges within the capsules, and you're not neglecting that movement specific aspect to joint health, which I think a lot of people when we talked about earlier, when you are pushing aesthetics and not keeping an eye on function as well. It's funny you talked about that variation, because it's funny, I tend to start with the more traditional Cossack where you're starting from the top, but then I tend to actually finish it with, and I have never had a name for it, I just kind of call it almost hovering Cossacks or something like that, where you are actually, like you say, staying down and switching directly from one side to the other.
Yeah.
I've never done it loaded. So now you've set a challenge for me that I need to now go and do it loaded to progress my mobility. So there you go.
Yeah. I mean, even at my house, I have 50-pound dumbbells. Using the 50-pound dumbbell, I'll go a little bit more slowly, and then I pause in the end position. It is brutal. Or, I mean, I've gone up to 135 pounds in a landmine setup. And I mean, same thing, dumbbells, or the barbell is lengthwise. The end is between your legs. You're holding on to it. It's loaded with the weight, and you can just press from side to side, and you can use a significant load.
Yeah, and you're getting those adductors in a very lengthened range, which is you're not going to get with doing the cable and machine variations. So I think that's, definitely a great variation. So for the listeners listening, get that into your plan in some way or form.
Yeah. And actually something that reminded me of my earlier days for my training, not my coaching, but my own training. I tended to fall prey to the ego lifting, where I would lift way too heavy. Like, for example, front squats, back squats, deadlifts, hip thrusts. I mean, my form was never horrible, but I mean, it could have been a lot better. And even just now training the way that I'm training, I am so much stronger. I recover so much better. So I've removed the ego lifting from my training. And I mean, with clients, I talk about the importance. I mean, of course, it will vary from person to person, but I like to leave several good reps in the tank per set, depending on what they're doing. Obviously, quality over quantity helps them recover better. It helps them train more consistently. So that's also a huge philosophy of mine, is leaving a rep or two, or sometimes maybe even 3 in the tank.
Right. I think that's interesting when you have the kind of performance world, or you have different, emphasis and goals. For example, a lot of my own training at the moment is very low volume, but it's very high intensity. So literally the almost opposite approach, where I'm literally taking any set that's a working set or deemed as a working set, that is taken to full mechanical failure. However, the sets as a result are very low, because you're creating a very, very high level of stimulus. Of course, you're accumulating a lot of fatigue within those sets as well. So hence why the volume has to be lower. But I suppose it's split in such a way where there's enough recoverability between sessions. But it's funny you mentioned this specifically, because we've had a lot of conversations. I'm part of a mentoring group that we're kind of going through the actual RTS curriculum that I mentioned at the moment. And it's a very open-minded group with a lot of broad backgrounds. And we had a discussion around the reps and reserve thing, because, obviously people like Dr. Mike Israetel and stuff, they're very big for the RIR, reps and reserve type. And I think the problem is people have almost split themselves into a camp now. There's kind of like the reps and reserve, and then, oh no, I'm just high intensity and I never ever leave reps in the tank. And I completely get the arguments for both sides as it pertains to hypertrophy. However, if you're working with the general population, I just think, is there really a need for the gen pop client to, unless they've got, like, say they're going through a body composition phase and they're maybe really chasing like a physique transformation, sure, you might do a phase of that. But for long-term health and longevity, do they really need to be pushing that envelope often? I don't think so. So yeah, I completely agree. Like, if you've got to really understand who's the person you're working with, what's the goal of the client in front of us, and what are the other factors going on in their life that we need to consider outside of just their training and ability to.
And I also think it can vary from exercise to exercise. So for example, with certain clients, like anything where it's higher risk, like a higher risk exercise and probably with a higher load, that's when I tend to tell them to leave several good reps in a tank. And I mean, if it's something where it's a relatively safe exercise, maybe body weight only, band, cable, something like that, that's kind of when you can almost train to failure. But I always train to technical failure. If somebody's form goes, that's it, or including my own form, that's when I'll stop. If my form breaks down, I'm not going to keep pushing, because I mean, you don't want to reinforce crappy habits.
Yeah, and you
I mean,
joints as well. Like, if you're starting to really break down mechanically, then are you actually keeping certainly from a hypertrophy point, we often talk about, like, if you're doing, say, quad work to failure, a hack squat is a reverse band hack squat, for example, is a very good safe environment to do that. But you would definitely not do that for barbell back or front squat, because it's just like you said, just the risk to reward ratio of going to failure on something like that makes absolutely no sense. So you want to pick your battle. So I couldn't agree anymore. I mean, the context might be slightly different depending on clientele, but 100% exercise selection and looking at proximity to failure, it's very exercise specific, and there has to be, like you say, a very safe, stable environment, or a low load there, like a low risk reward ratio, if it's something like body weight or whatever else, to do that. And I suppose there's even some body weight movements you would have to be very careful about going to failure on as well, because such high degrees of fatigue. Let's just take your muscle ups, for example. You try to keep forcing muscle ups that you don't have, that's asking for plenty of shoulder issues, labrum tear or something along those lines.
Yeah, dips would be another one.
Big time.
Dips, especially on rings, just because they're obviously very unstable. I don't know if you're familiar with Russian dips.
Yes, I am. We did them a lot in cross
There,
accessory work. Yeah.
that would be another one. I mean, muscle ups, yeah, you don't want to train to failure, but I find when you get really tired, you're not going to make it back up to the bar.
It's almost like rate limiting in itself as a skill, right?
Yeah. But I mean, you don't want to keep doing them when your transition is sloppy, when your presses are sloppy, when there's no control. And I mean, so for me, it's been interesting. I have probably this past almost year, I've probably never been as strong. I mean, even in my heavier lifting days as I am now. And I mean, the heaviest weights I have access to are 50-pound dumbbells. I have been doing a lot of body weight training. I mean, especially for my upper body, but with my lower body, just because I haven't had access to a trap bar or front squat or a bar for front squats, back squats, I have been doing a lot of single leg work and heavy. So I'm quite excited when I do go back to the gym. And I mean, I'm just being very careful. I see my mom regularly. And so for me, kind of my sacrifice is not putting myself in situations where I might put, I mean, myself at risk, but more importantly, her. So that's why I have not been to the gym since last March. But when I do, I mean, I'm really excited just to see how well I perform with trap bar deadlifts, front squats, barbell RDLs. Those are kind of the three barbell lifts that I'm missing.
Mm.
I think I'm probably going to be even stronger.
Yeah, I think I was going to say you know deep down that you're going to go back and you're going to crush those lifts. I think Luke Lehman, that guy I was talking about earlier, he talked about this really well. They do an interesting thing as part of their kind of flagship program is a program called Program Design, and but it involves a lot of other things. He dives into like the autonomic nervous system and matching nutrition and training demands and all that sort of stuff. But he often talks about for a lot of their clients who also happen to be other coaches as well, they do a lot of these kind of what we call structural integrity phases where they take out all the bilateral work for lower body or for upper body or both, and they just work on getting really strong on those unilateral movements. And he
Yeah.
wanted the exact same thing, is that almost without exception, the guys will go back to their main list and they're like, what the hell just happened? He's like, well, look at those all those split squats you've been doing. You realize now that you weren't really getting much length in that quad.
Mm-hmm.
As an extended position, you weren't doing X, Y, and Z. You've now essentially not only have you improved your strength and position-specific strength, you've now increased your overall mobility and control in those positions. So it's a no-brainer that you're going to be stronger when you go back to those bilateral movements. So yeah, I think I'm very excited to see when you are able to get back into the gym. I've got a few things I'm looking for. I'm looking for you to do 10 muscle ups by 6 months, and I'm looking for you to smash all your PRs on your list. No pressure.
None at all. Actually, I have a weird PR for trap bar deadlifts. It was one of those things. I just wanted to see how many reps I could do at 230. And it's been a couple of years, but I did 15 reps at 230.
That's solid.
I'm not a 1RM person. I never have been. I don't even enjoy doing them. I kind of do really well with the mid to, I mean, I generally don't do 15 reps. That's not what I do. It was just kind of on that day. I just felt really good. So I kept going. I'd love to be able to do 230 for 20.
See, I think those type of goals are so good as well. And I think, yes, I think if you're a power lifter, you obviously have to meet those standards of movement has to be done a certain way. You have to do your 1 rep maximum. But I think strength is so multifaceted. And like you said, limiting yourself to just one or a very narrow rep range, for me, doesn't seem right. I think if you can test your strength across multiple rep ranges, and then like you were referring to with risk to reward ratio earlier, it's quite a lot on the joints, the nervous system. It's a lot to put on yourself to constantly lift heavy in that 1 to 5 rep range. So like you said, like if that risk to reward just doesn't seem to weigh up for you, then it's amazing how much stronger you can get in those other rep ranges. So I think it's great to have like 20 rep maxes, 10 rep maxes outside of just the traditional 1, 3, and 5 as well.
Yeah. And I mean, even for me, I have always loved doing conditioning. And I think it does stem from my sports background, from my soccer. So because my conditioning, like I still do conditioning very regularly, you're not going to be able to do high rep, heavy deadlifts if your conditioning sucks.
No, I agree. You've got to have that aerobic base. And funny enough, that's another thing that's crept back into the body composition world in the last 3 to 5 years is the importance of having that aerobic stand, baseline, and really working on your aerobic base, your mitochondrial density, and all the other benefits that come from that. And lo and behold, like you said, you build that up, that aerobic base, and you improve your other conditioning qualities. And of course, you're able to rest much more effectively between sets. You're able to recover better between training sessions. And so it's funny how there's a lot of these modalities, a lot of these, concepts from, I will almost say, that are being applied much more stringently in the strength conditioning world and the performance world that are now coming to fruition there as well. So it is funny to see all of these crossovers, but I completely agree. Like the aerobic system is the base system for all the other energy systems. So if that's not in check, then you're just rate limiting not only your performance, but also actually from a muscle growth perspective, it's important to have that
Mm-hmm.
well. So yeah.
Yeah, I had a client, I think probably about 5 years ago, and he was really, really strong, but we could not go past about 5 reps with the head, like barbell lifts, front squats, back squats, and then also trap bar deadlifts, just because his conditioning was poor. So once he started implementing conditioning, what a difference.
Okay.
And I mean, he just didn't like doing it. But I said, I'm like, well, if you ever want to be able to do more reps, and we kind of did address certain aesthetic goals because he did want to add a bit more muscle. I said, you probably want to start working on your conditioning. And I mean, he ended up really enjoying it after a while, but what he really loved, his results just with the strength training.
Yeah, big time. And it's funny, I don't know if you've seen this with some of the male clients you work with, but I think a lot of them think that if they do lots and lots of cardio, that it's going to ruin their gains. They're going to lose all their gains. They're going to lose all their strength. And like you just said, like it actually ends up, it's so surprising to them when it literally does the exact opposite. It actually helps improve all of those other qualities. And we've seen that a ton with our clients as well. So it's cool to see that that's transferring across other people's clients as well. They're seeing the same sort of.
Yeah. Actually, a current client of mine, that is totally true. And he's another great example of somebody who was just beating himself up kind of with the ego lifting. And so when he first came to me, he was talking like he was doing the heavy lifts, but he'd been experiencing a lot of muscle and joint discomfort. So I had him send me a video of his trap bar deadlifts. And it takes a lot to shock me, but I honestly it was pretty bad. And he was doing, I think, 450 pounds, and so many breakdowns happening where I was just like, okay, this probably explains a lot of why you're not feeling great. And so I said to him, I'm like, okay, we're going to go down to 225. He was actually totally okay with it. And so 225, kind of as he kept working on his form, as I would give him the green light, we would slowly add weight. And he's been a client for over 3 years. And since he kind of started, I don't want to say started from scratch, but we kind of undid so many bad habits, allowed his body to recover from years of just having, I mean, he was beating himself up over and over for years. His muscles feel great, his joints feel great. And something else that was really cool, I mean, even kind of recently, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. He would be somebody where I would tell him a certain amount of weight to use. And then I'd see his videos and I'm like, well, this doesn't look like your form from the week before. What is going on? He's like, oh, yeah, I added an extra 50 pounds. So I was like, no. Okay, this is what we're going to do. And so he went for a solid 2 months using the weights that I suggested, leaving. I told him, I was extreme with him. I told him to leave 3 or 4 good reps in the tank per set because I knew he would probably leave more like 2.
Yeah.
Couple months later, he went back to a heavier lift and he was stronger than he had been before. So basically taking a step back, allowing his muscles and joints to recover, really doing things properly, he was actually stronger with more weight. And he hadn't even touched that weight in months.
Just shows you, it says a lot about the importance of sometimes taking 2 steps back to make leaps and gallops forward, right? So
yeah,
it's in the pudding there.
And I mean, most of my client, like he usually listens very well, but sometimes I will catch him like the ego lifting and he jokes about how the ego kind of creeps in. So just like leaving the reps in the tank. I mean, especially if your form does have a tendency of breaking down, it's essential, at least as far as I'm concerned. Like you want to do things well. You want to be able to feel good. You want to be able to move well and like you want to train for life. Or at least like that's kind of the mentality I want my clients to have. Like this is kind of a life thing.
100%. You want them to, like you say, get into their 60s and 70s and be really robust and still be able to function and enjoy their retirement rather than becoming, a burden to the healthcare system and to their friends and family around them. So yeah, couldn't agree.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah.
No, go
Oh,
for it.
sorry.
Go for it.
Oh, I can't remember. It froze for a second. I can't remember what I was going to say. I think I was going to say, I mean, even over time, your training might evolve,
Hmm.
but still, I mean, I want people to think about this like training for life. And I mean, people will ask me, well, why, like, what do you train for? And I will tell them I train for life.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is as well, yes, like you say, goals might change, the style or approach to training might change, but it's got to be adding to more than, and I think this speaks to your point right back at the start. It's got to add to more than just your appearance and also just the being able to put the most weight on the bar. It's got to make you better outside of the gym as well. So if you're not
Yeah.
mind, I think you're missing potentially the bigger picture, right? I want to move on to I think that was an incredible segue. I really enjoyed that. Let's get into the final two questions. One I want to touch on is the article, very famous article that you've been kind of that's had so many views. I can't remember how many it was, but it was well over, I think, like 250, 300,000. It was quite a lot. But it was the article that was entitled The Dangers of Today's Female Fitness Industry. And I think that's quite an interesting one to bring up now. Obviously, at the time, it gained huge traction. And so it's kind of a bit of a two-part question. This is one, how different do you see things now? Obviously, even since you wrote that, which I think was about 6 years back or 5 years back, how
Yeah.
things have changed since then and now. And outside of that particular article, what's the piece of content or article that you've written or content that you've produced that you feel really, really proud of personally?
So I think that we have come a long way since I wrote that article. And I think it was 2016. I looked at the date, but I think I think he might have not repurposed the article, but I think he might have kind of updated it. And so I couldn't find the actual date of the original article. So, I mean, I think things have come a long way, but I still do think we have a long way to go. And I mean, I am seeing a lot more content online that women are putting out on social media. And again, it might just be the people that I follow. So I'm kind of in my own naive bubble where I'm maybe not seeing everything. But there are a lot of really strong women. There are a lot of women who are about, and I use the word more in quotations because everybody has a different definition of what more to them means. In my article, I talked about how women were constantly being told how we should train to kind of to make ourselves shrink, tone,
Mm.
make ourselves I mean, it was kind of more just about controlling the way we look versus what we're capable of doing. And I mean, most of the time when you see stuff relating to men's training, it's more about making yourself stronger, more muscular, more powerful. Women, it's very different. So yeah, I think it's improved. I still do think we have a long way to go. And I mean, I do tend to follow people who kind of are more into what I'm into as well. So I might be missing a lot.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to fall into, like you say, an echo chamber sometimes because you have your kind of your people who are on the same wavelength and kind of do the same stuff. I suppose from seeing a little bit more what's going on in the body composition realm, 100% there's a lot of really good, certainly a lot more really good female role models out there now, constantly talking about the importance of, and often it comes with a very similar backstory. They end up with binge eating disorder and then they had to overcome that.
Mm-hmm.
There's all those things that go on with that. In fact, funny enough, a lot of the clients I work with, I actually work with probably more females now than I do guys. It's probably about 75% females. And I would say quite a high amount of them end up coming to me initially. They don't have a menstrual cycle. They've developed really distorted relationships with themselves, with food, and ends up taking a lot of work and time to kind of get them back up to a really good strong point, both in terms of how they feel, their menstrual cycle being really regular and functioning really well, and being
Yeah.
they're in the gym enjoying the fact that they're getting stronger and eating more food to support that versus the kind of constant do more and eat less scenario that has always been promoted so heavily. I think you obviously touched on that in your article as well. So yeah, I think it is. It's definitely improved in that realm of the industry as well. However, there's almost now a bit of an issue on the opposite end of the spectrum where women are now seeing so many of these strong, really muscular women that there's almost becoming a bit of a and also sometimes they don't often portray the best image in the sense of it's like the highlight reel, right? We know that social media tends to be the highlight reel. And so I think a lot of women are often thinking that they can get to that physique. Well, it's two ways. They either are like, I'll never be like that, and it really puts them off, makes them feel really unconfident about how they are because they're not nowhere near where these women are. Or the other way around is they think that it's super, super easy to get that because a lot of the women who are portraying the physique they have, they're making it sound like all you have to do is this, all you have to do is that. So I think there's, like you said, things have improved, but I think there's also new layers of complexity to the narrative now than there used to be.
Yeah, actually, something else that has improved, I do think there are a lot more female role models out there. Back in the day when I was a new coach, like I mentioned earlier, Jillian Michaels, people like that, those were the only names out there. So, I mean, as a young coach, I did not have a lot of role models. And also in women's sports, there are way more women now who are kind of front and center and are role models for girls, for women. I mean, even for men.
Yeah.
Because like these women are also amazing role models for young men or boys. So I think that's changed. And I mean, even in professional sports, I don't know all their names, but I mean, there are some women's strength and conditioning coaches in the professional sports leagues, the men's professional sports leagues. And I mean, I have a client, and I mean, again, I'm a woman, and he is in it's a male professional sports league. He is the president of the team. And he sought me out to work with him. So I'm his coach. So, I mean, I don't think that would have happened years ago.
Yeah. I think there's a lot more of that. There's a lot more fluidity in terms of, I certainly see that over here, even a place like the Middle East where you think that would be a little less, a bit more segregated, but actually you see a lot of male clients working with female coaches. And I think that definitely been lowered much more than it has been in the past. I think when I was starting out in the industry maybe 11 years ago, it was very much a lot of the girls training with the female trainers, a lot of the guys training with the guy trainers, but it's very, very different now. So I would agree. I've definitely observed a shift for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, even in professional sports, I don't know if you follow baseball at all.
Not closely. I've got family in America, and I've got two cousins that actually live in Canada. One lives in Toronto and one lives in Vancouver. So they follow, and I see vicariously through them that they go to different games and watch different sports. But I'm not. If you had to ask me anything about baseball, I'm pretty clueless. So,
I mean, I grew up a huge fan. I used to live in Toronto, or a suburb of Toronto. So I used to go to Blue Jays games when I was a kid. I used to go to the Sky Dome, which is their stadium. But now in Major League Baseball, the Florida Marlins, I think she's the general manager. They just hired, I believe, the first female general manager in Major League Baseball history. Wow. And I mean, that's huge. And she'd been around for a really long time. And I think she'd interviewed on a bunch of occasions, and she finally got the job all those years later. So, I mean, that's a huge milestone for women. And again, I am seeing more and more women who are strength and conditioning coaches for the professional sports teams. So I do think things are improving.
Awesome. Well, I hope it continues to go that way as well. And like you say, the gender part becomes pretty much not even a factor. It just becomes about, right, well, are you good at getting the job done? Can you produce results? That's ultimately what it should come down to, right? Is the competence of the coach and not any of the other factors that have been considered in the past that have kind of went against certain people getting certain positions, especially like you say higher up those professional leagues. So let's all may it continue. That's what I say.
Yeah, and I don't do them very often, but I had a quote post I put on Instagram, and I think my words were, your ability to coach has nothing to do with your gender, which is true. And again, that's why I kind of am down the middle. I am a coach. That's who I am. Yes, I'm a woman, but that does not mean that I just cater to women. Like, I am kind of a coach for everybody, and my ability has nothing to do with my gender.
100%.
Sure, my gender might help in certain ways. Like maybe when I'm working with women, it might help in certain areas. I might understand something more. But generally, I mean, my gender is irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, apart from the relatability component that naturally you will have, then yeah, of course, like you say, your body is a human body and it's capable of doing lots of really cool things, and that's ultimately what matters, right?
Yeah. And actually, something else I forgot to mention, in the fitness industry, and it's improved a lot, women are kind of being ignored and neglected. So, for example, conferences, when people are presenting, a lot of the time you will see an all male panel of people presenting. It's slowly improving, but I mean, I still do think there's a long way to go because there are so many amazing women in the industry who should be front and center and they're not.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, like I said, I mean, Andrew Coates, you mentioned him on or off air. He was part of, or he was responsible for helping organize a conference that I presented at last September. And I can't remember if it was 50-50 for men and women presenting, or it was like 40-60, but at least it was more even.
Hmm.
I presented at another, and I was the lone female presenter at a conference they jokingly called Bro Can because it was in Spokane and it was all men and me.
Yes. Hopefully that changes with time because, like you say, there's a lot of super intelligent female coaches out there with a lot of really good things to say. So let's hope that changes soon.
Yeah, I mean, it has, and I think it will continue to improve.
Well, fingers crossed for sure. So I think the final question that we're getting into really here, and I think this is a good one to leave to last. It goes without saying that the ultimate pull-up programs and the push-up programs have been an incredible success. From your perspective, what's made these plans so successful and far-reaching?
I think probably, and I mean, it even goes with the content that I put out, not just the push up or pull up program. And I also have a landmine program.
That's right.
With my content, I want people to really learn. I don't want people to just do something. I want them to kind of understand the reason behind it. So, I mean, that's why I do have the really detailed written descriptions in my programs. I want people to feel like I am there with them. But with my products, I mean, the pull up program is a little more fundamental. The push up program, I did kind of incorporate some of the more innovative exercises. I want people to feel excited about training. I want them to feel empowered. I want them to understand kind of the rationale behind what they're doing. And then, of course, I want them to achieve results. So I think I kind of did accomplish that with these programs. And I mean, because of that, people are still buying them, people are still talking about them pretty much every day. I will be, and I mean, the pull up program is over 3 years old. I almost am tagged every day in a video or post of somebody doing pull ups or training for pull ups, and they just feel excited.
That's
Like,
awesome.
that's my big thing. I want people to be excited about training, I want them to be passionate. I mean, I'm passionate about training. The people who tend to seek me out as clients, they either are passionate about training or they want to be passionate about training. And just again, train for life. So that's kind of what my programs are all about.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also, like I said, very technical. So a lot of coaches, they buy my products to use with their clients, to teach them the exercises, to better their own coaching. And I mean, because these programs aren't just about pull-ups and push-ups, you're getting so much more. They're also learning so many different exercises they might not be familiar with. They're learning different coaching cues, how to put everything together.
Yep.
And so that kind of is the gist of my programs.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, I can vouch for that personally because I kind of told you when I emailed you off air. I think it was like yesterday, potentially. I sent you this, and I always like to, if I can, first of all, support the people that are coming onto the podcast because then we can all help each other and help each other's businesses and everything else. But I also just like to make sure that if I'm going to ask questions about something, I kind of want to understand it and I want to know, I want to see it firsthand. So I told you I bought both the pull up and the push up programs. So I wanted to see, right, well, let's see what's involved here. And I can definitely vouch for the fact that one, they're great programs, very balanced. They're definitely going to achieve the goal of getting good at pull-ups and push-ups. But like you said, it's full body training. Nothing is really unturned, either from a mobility standpoint, from in terms of working on core strength, positional specific strength. And like you said, there's really no stone unturned. As far as the explanations go, like you said, it's very, very detailed. And there's video demos for every single exercise as well. And the thing you probably didn't mention as well is that what I thought was a really nice touch is at the end of both the programs, you have the little bonus sections. So you kind of have
Yes.
bonus exercises. You have the full section on like breathing and essentially explaining to people what breathing and bracing actually means. So I felt like for me, it was a really, really well balanced resource and a ton of value. So I would say to anyone probably listening to this that wants to go check that out, it's well worth the money, especially if you buy the bundle, the two programs together. So definitely go and do that.
Yeah, the bundle has been really popular since I put it together. And I haven't talked about this publicly at all. I'm in the process of working on another program, similar back or like similar layout, detail. I'm going to call it the Ultimate Lower Body and Core Program, because obviously all my programs, I mean, the pull up and push up, even though it's a full body program, if you were to say, I mean, it does cover more upper body than lower body. So this program is all lower body, but also core. And then I also have a bonus section, because I do love the bonus sections, where it's 11 of my go-to exercises for the lower legs and feet, because I find so many people overlook the lower leg and foot with their training. And so that's kind of, I mean, I'm still finishing the program. It's almost done. I plan on releasing it. I'm going to have a launch when I have my 1-year anniversary launch or sale for the push-up program. So I'm going to put them out at the same time.
Smart. And I think it's good because, like you say, you almost could run those 3 programs back to back and kind of treat them like you say, yes, you're training full body in each of them, but they're definitely specialization programs. So you can cover off your upper body pulling, your upper body pushing, and then you can hit the lower body. And by the time you've done all 3 of those programs and went through, I think each program, at least the ones I looked at, had 4 phases each, right?
Yes. The pull up is 4, push up is 4, and then I have the landmine program, which again, I mean, it's not quite as popular as the pull up or push up because it is more of a niche product. And a lot of people don't even know what landmine training is, but it's also really good. This lower body program, I wanted to create something. I mean, obviously we know a lot of people are training at home. So it's awesome for home workouts, but it's also great for the gym. So I kind of wanted to create something that's good for everybody. And I mean, like we were talking about with my own training, my training in the past year has been, I mean, my lower body has never been stronger. And I'm training pretty much the way I have designed this program.
That's awesome, because then, like we talked about earlier, you're experiencing it, and then you're going to be able to pass that on authentically because you've been through all the things that you're preaching, right? So that's super important.
Yes, and then even just I'm excited to have the carryover to the barbell lifts. I just want to see how strong I am now that I have dropped the ego lifting and I really prioritize the single leg training, adductors, hip flexors. I mean, all kind of, I hate to throw around the term functional training because we know it's obviously very abused, that word, but it has really been very, I'll say it, functional. It's been very functional what I've been doing.
Yeah, you can almost say fit for purpose. It's been fit for purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, I just don't like functional.
Listen, I'm not even going to go there. Not going to go there.
Well, you know what you see online, if you're to even like hashtag functional training, you see what comes up and it's like somebody standing on a BOSU doing a squat and then, I'm kidding, balancing something on their head. And it's all just like the training that does not make sense and is deemed as functional.
Yeah, it's the less said about it, the better. Let's put it that way.
I know, that's why I didn't even want to say the word functional.
We're not even going to give it airtime. Let's say you've been doing meeting the demands of your environment training.
Yeah, I mean, it's very athletic, and something that I've really enjoyed about this training, without having touched a barbell, I've actually put some good size on my legs and glutes. And for me, I mean, I don't necessarily train for aesthetics, but I was always wanting to put a little bit more size on my legs, but without kind of training like a bodybuilder, just because I love kind of my more athletic style training that I do. And so for me, I've really been able to achieve that doing this training, again, really focusing on the single leg stuff.
Yeah, well, if the principles are adhered to and they're all the same, then like you say, it's just a different vehicle, right?
Exactly. And for me, like I just kind of always, I mean, bodybuilding's a sport too. It's just a different sport. And so for me, my training preference, I kind of like to train more in a way where I feel like a soccer player, even though I know most soccer players, their training is terrible.
Yeah, it's I think in the sports conditioning world is super interesting. I think at least in North America, it seems like there's a lot of really good strength conditioning coaches and a lot of good programs out there for professional teams. But I've also just seen, like you say, like some absolute, I'm just going to say it, absolute garbage. It's just really, really, really bad training. You think at that sort of higher level, and you see it a lot in, I think the sport that I see the worst S&C done, not entirely across the board, but just as a generalization, would be soccer.
Yes, European soccer.
Oh, man.
It's horrifying. The North American is quite good. I see a lot of amazing strength and conditioning coaches, both men and women in North America. But I do follow, but I mean, because I love soccer and I love European soccer, I do follow several European soccer players, some of the top in the world on Instagram, and they sometimes post their training videos. And I seriously just feel like curling up in a ball and hiding under a blanket because it is just so horrible what I see. The exercises they're doing, their form, it just doesn't make sense. And I mean, the people I follow, they've been in the one person is, I don't want to name him. He's one of my favorite players, but he plays on Real Madrid. And it's just horrifying what he's doing. And obviously he's getting it from somewhere.
Yeah. I think what it just shows as well, though, is that a lot of these guys are so talented at the sport that it doesn't really matter what they do with their gym time. They're still going to be fantastic players, but that doesn't mean that the stuff they do in the gym is even remotely effective. And it also doesn't
No.
effective training in the gym, they actually would become a better player on the pitch, but we'll never know unless they change their training style, right?
Yeah. And I mean, interestingly enough, this one player, I want to say he's 32 or 33. So, I mean, he's technically considered a veteran. He has been injured a lot more recently. And I do wonder if better training would make a difference. Like he is constantly injured.
I think you and I both know the answer to that. It probably most definitely.
Yeah, I just wanted to not kind of black and white. I just wanted to kind of give a it depends answer, even though I know probably he would not be injured quite as often if his training was better.
I mean, I think,
and I mean, even just form.
Factors that play into it for sure. We don't know what his sleep's like, what his lifestyle's like, but yeah, I mean, having a better training approach certainly isn't going to hurt.
No, and I mean, even just form. I saw him yesterday. He was doing a single leg. He was just doing a single leg squat onto a bench. And then as he would sit down, he would explode up. And he's currently injured, so he's not playing. But even just the lack of stability, the form, I just like, I couldn't believe it. It looked like somebody who had never trained before.
Crazy.
Yeah, I could rant on about this for hours, but
I'll tell you what. Let's wrap up there. Let's wrap up on a positive note. So I want the people who listen to these podcasts to obviously be able to come and find you, to be able to have a look at your programs, and just have a little bit of a look at your Instagram profile. And I just want you guys to go and see the absolute ninja stuff that Megan does. It's absolutely brilliant. And if it doesn't inspire you to move in different ways, even to a lot of our audience who are very body composition focused, there's a lot of great takeaways that you can take for other parts of your training from Megan's stuff as well. So Megan, where is the best place for people to come and find you?
I'll give two spots. So my website, megancallawayfitness.com. Right. So I mean, it has everything there. And then you can find me on Instagram, Megan Callaway Fitness. And that's where I share, I mean, most of my content is shared on Instagram, in my blog, and then my newsletter. And then, I mean, you can get all that through my website.
Awesome. So I'll make sure anyway in the show notes to link all of that down below so people can find you. And then, of course, what we like to do with these episodes as well is we like to do like what we call like Better Body Radio shorts. So we'll kind of take some of the audio aspect of it from some of the really cool things that you've said, and we'll share that on our social media as well. And when we do,
awesome.
We'll also link people to your profile and stuff as well, because they can come to you, they can go on your link tree on your profile, and they can start exploring all of your resources, right?
Yes, I'll add this to my link tree, and then I mean in my story with the swipe up, and I'll put it out in my newsletter and just like all my different platforms.
Very cool. Well, we're also looking forward to welcoming some new listeners, some fans of yours onto the show as well, to listen to this episode and hopefully some others as well. But Megan, once again, thanks so much for giving up so much of your time on a cold, early Canada morning.
Thank you for having me. And I was going to say, it's not that cold. And we did just have snow on the weekend. And now I think it's just depressing gray rain.
So talk about ending on a positive note, right? Well, at least
I know.
Doing super well though. So keep at it. It's been very cool to watch.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Speak to you soon.